Hi everybody. Okay, so welcome to the concluding part of exercise 1.1 under course info under the part 1. Alright, so in the last video we solved this. So we're able to solve part of the exercise 1.1, but we didn't finish it, right? So this was part of the implementation, but this is not exactly what we're asked to do. So let me go back to the question. So here we are asked to, okay, here it says define the new component in the file app.jsx, and then the app component body will approximately be as follows. So here we can see that they are asking us to put the const definitions inside the app component, and also the header here should have some passed in data, likewise the content and the total also. But if you look at our implementation thus far, we currently don't have const definitions inside the root component, which is the app component, right? Here we have no const definitions. All our const definitions are in the individual components, such as the exercises here, the parts we also have here, and the likes, and also the course we also have here. So we are expected to have const definitions inside the app components, right? And also we pass in data of each of the consts here. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing right now. So before we proceed, let's confirm that the stage we are right now, our app runs fine. So let's run the app using the npm run dev. Okay, so it's up. Let's go to the browser to confirm if our app is running just fine. Okay, so here we have our app running very fine, right? So the app, nothing is wrong with it, but we are expected to do some implementations, right, which we are yet to do. Okay, so going back to our code, what we need to do here is, let me just close this terminal for now. What we need to do here is we need to pass in data, right, in some of these components, right? So we need to pass in data, and that's where the props, the part of the props comes into play. If you study this particular notes on part 1, right, on the part 1, we are going to see that they talked about props, right? And props helps us to pass in data in our components. So that's what this instruction is trying to say right now. So where do we start from? I think with header, we need to start with header. We need to pass in data through the header. We need to pass in data through the content. We need to pass in data also through the total as well, right? So how do we do this? Okay, all right. So for now, what we just do is we remove this cost variable. We remove part 1 to exercise 3 variable, and then we don't need this here as well. So we push everything under the into this app component, right? So starting from here, let's begin with this. Let's cut this and then let's place it here. Now if you run the code now, it is going to break because we are not through with the implementation, right? So that's something about coding. If you are not through the implementation and you run, the code might break. That doesn't mean you are not doing the right thing, but just have to get done with the right thing that you are doing for us to have a working code. So we remove this, and then what we do for the header is we pass in props. So props enables us to add to passing data, right? It enables us to pass in data. Now, what we do here, we are not going to leave this place as course now. We are simply going to say props dot course, right? Because at the point where we are going to be rendering this header, we need to pass in the data, and that's where this props comes into play. Const helps us to pass in course as a data, right, and also as a property, right? So props, this course here is a property which helps us to render this header. So after doing that, you can just come here to close this empty space here. The next part we want to go to is content. So let's cut this entire part for content and do likewise the way we did for course. Then we paste this here. Then we write props here. And now, instead of having just part 1 and exercise 1, part 2, exercise 2, and the likes, we add props to it. So we say props dot part 1. Let me just copy props dot. Then we paste props dot here. Yes, that's props dot exercises 1. We do the same thing for part 2, exercise 2, part 3, exercise 3. Okay, and also we close this empty space. Now we are through with content rather. The next thing we want to work is, okay, for total, we are also going to cut this, but here we don't need to paste it here because exercise 1, 2, and 3 are already defined here. So we can just take this out here. Then here we come here to write props as well. So this part, let's see what happens. Okay, now starting with header, what we do here is, because when we go back to the header, we can see that course here is a property, right? So we simply come here and say course equals, then put in the curly brace. Now this particular curly brace, it accepts values, right? So we can choose to just say we want to write a string as our course, but already we've defined course here. So instead of writing a new string for course, we simply just write whatever value we want. Here in our case is course as a variable. We come here and we put it inside this curly brace. So this solves it for header. So when we render this particular header, what we get is half stack application development. Let's see if this is going to run now. If it doesn't run well, then no need to be scared. We are still on the right track. Okay, this does not run because we need to continue with some other parts of our code, right? Now, the next thing we want to do is to render content. Now, we can see that part 1, exercise 1, and the likes, all of them here, they are what? Properties. So we come to content here, and then we say so for this part here, part 1, part 2, exercise 1, and the likes, they are properties. So starting with part 1, we say part 1 is equal to, what do we put in? We put in part 1, which is a string that contains fundamentals of React, right? So after that, we also write what? Exercise 1 as well, because those are what we are returning from the component content. So we come here and say exercise 1 is equal to, let's just copy this and paste. Okay, so now we worked for part 1 and exercise 1 for the content component. Now we are going to copy this and then work for part 2 and part 3. So we simply copy this and paste 2 more times. Then we change every part 1 here to part 2, exercise 1 to exercise 2, and also we do the same thing for part 1 down here. We say part 3 here, exercise 1, change it to exercise 3, and here exercise 3. Okay, so we are through with the header component and the content component. Now let's work with the total component. How do we solve for the total? Now, if you look at this total very well, it will be kind of challenging to actually work with this. Let's run this code and see if our code runs well now. Still, it doesn't run well, right? Okay. Let's be very sure that we are running this app. Yes. So this app is currently running. Okay. That's because we are not through with total, right? Because there's an error in the entire code, so it might not run well. So how do we solve for total? How do we render total? What we can do is, because we want to show the total exercises done, what we need to do is we can come here and create a new variable that adds each exercises together. So we can just come here and say const before we even do this, let's go to total, right? And then we need to change a few things. So under total here, we can just come here and say, let's remove this part and say props dot sum of exercises. Now that means that sum of exercises here is going to become a property which we are going to fill in this total. So we can just copy this one here and then paste it here and then do this. Now we need to pass in a value for sum of exercises. That's when we have to come here and then we can say we create a variable name which can still be the same name and say sum of exercises equals the sum of part 1, part 2, and part 3. So we say part 1 plus part 2 plus part 3. So let's save this and see if we've done the right thing. So here we need to pass in this sum of exercises. Let's copy this again and then let's place it here. All right, I hope there's no error in this program. Let's save our work and let's check if it's properly rendered now. Okay, not still working as expected. Now, what do we need to do? There's something wrong with our code. There's something wrong with this code. Okay, let's check if we are properly running the right code. It is giving us error in exporting app. Okay, so let's just close this. Let's close this and then let's run it all over again. Okay, I think we are having some issues here. This part is saying could not find name exercise 1. Do you mean exercises 1? Okay, I think this is where the issue is. We were writing exercise 1 instead of exercises. So let's come here. Let's change exercise 1 to exercises. Let's change exercise 2 to exercises 2. Now this is what we call debugging. Let's change exercise 3 to exercises 3. Now you are going to be facing a lot of these, right? That doesn't mean you don't know what you're actually doing. It's still part of the learning process. So this is also not too bad. It just shows us how to debug our code. And also when you want to check for errors as well, always make sure that your development tool is on, right? So let me go back to this part and we can see that yes, we have our code working well now, right? But here there's an issue here. Here it says fundamental of React. You are supposed to have the numbers here. Using props to pass data, we are supposed to have numbers here and numbers of. So we need to still work on our program. Let's go back to see what is wrong. Let's close this and then let's take this again. Okay, so for the header is okay, the content is not showing this props.exercises, it's only showing the part. So that's for the content. How can we solve that? Let's go back to the content. So exercise 1 here is a property, but here exercise 1 is also a property. I don't think this is the best thing to do. Let's see where the problem is coming from. Props.exercises 1, exercises 2, exercises 3. Okay, the same issue we actually had there is what we are having here also. So the recommendation is that when we write a particular thing and I want to use that variable again, it's better not to write it out again. It's better we just copy and then we paste. Here I actually wrote this here and I came here to write it, I guess. So I'm supposed to have copied it so that we'll be having the same name. So let's change this from exercise 1 to exercises 1. Let's see if that fixed it. Now exercises 2 to exercises 2. Then exercises 3 to exercises 3. Now we are going to be debugging until our code runs well. Okay, now we have fundamentals of React. Now the values are now showing. We have 10, 7, and 14. But here we are having something different. It's supposed to give us a sum of all of this, right? But now it's showing just fundamentals of React. It's showing the parts instead of the exercises. So let's fix that. So total. Okay, so here the sum of exercises, we're using part 1, part 2, part 3. These parts are supposed to be exercises. So we use exercises 1, we add it to exercises 2, and we add that also to exercises 3. No, sorry. Let's copy this properly. So let's save this and see if our app works very well now. Let's check. Okay, so here we have half stack application development, fundamentals of React 10, using props to pass data 7, state of a component 14, and number of exercises 31. So when you add 10, 7, and 14 all together, we see that we get 31, right? So our app at this point works very well, and this brings us to the end of. Okay, let's check very well. Let's go back to the question and see if we implemented what was asked. Okay, so we are asked to put in the const definitions here, which we did. Let's check. Yes, so these are the const definitions, and also we're asked to pass in data into each component, right? And that's where we actually used props. Now we had course, we had part 1, part 2, and part 3. For the total, we created a new variable name and a new property, right, called sum of exercises, and we filled it up. Let's check that as well. Yes, here for the total. So this brings us to the end of exercise 1.1, right? So this brings us to the end of the exercise 1.1 implementation. So the next video will be on exercise 1.2, which is this. So for now, I'll say keep coding and don't relent, right? Because it's not going to be easy, but don't relent. Keep coding and it's going to be all right. Have a nice time. Bye.